You sit beneath an ancient cedar tree at the edge of a forgotten clearing, where the border between the land of fire and the land of sound blurs into misty uncertainty. The evening air carries a sweetness that belies the approaching autumn, a mixture of wild grasses, distant smoke, and the earthy perfume of decaying leaves. As twilight deepens, you notice how the shadows stretch and yawn across the forest floor, reaching toward you with curious fingers. The clearing before you bears subtle traces of abandonment, stone foundations of what might have been a research outpost, now claimed by persistent vines and moss. Nature reclaims all things eventually, you reflect, even the most ambitious human endeavors. Small purple wildflowers push through cracks in the stone, their resilience a quiet rebellion against time itself. You've arrived at this place, following rumors and whispers, fragments of stories about hidden scrolls, abandoned laboratories, and the lingering presence of one who has walked between light and darkness for decades, the snake Sannin, Orochimaru, a name that still causes villagers to lower their voices, a figure shrouded in legend and fear, yet one whose footprints in history are undeniable. The wooden box beside you contains only a few items: a blank scroll, an inkstone, a brush with a snakebone handle, and a curious spherical container with sealed compartments. These were discovered by farmers tilling new ground miles from here, ordinary people who had no understanding of what they'd found. But you recognized the craftsmanship immediately, the meticulous attention to detail, the elegant functionality that speaks of a mind always reaching beyond conventional boundaries. A cool breeze whispers through the trees, carrying the first hints of evening chill. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders, your fingers brushing against the forehead protector in your pocket, its surface scratched, but the leaf symbol still visible. Identity has always been fluid in the shinobi world, you think, especially for those who question the boundaries set by villages and cages. The fading light catches on something half buried near the stone foundation, a small, round object glinting with faint iridescence. You approach carefully, kneeling to brush away the soil. Scale, larger than any normal snake's, with an opalescent sheen that seems to hold the last light of day within it. Without thinking, you pocket it, feeling an unexpected warmth radiating from it against your skin. As darkness settles more firmly around you, you light a small lantern, its gentle glow creating a circle of amber warmth. The journey that has brought you here has been long, traversing not just physical distance, but crossing the territories of memory and history. You've spoken with those who feared him, those who followed him, and the few who claim to have understood him. Each story contradicted the others, as though they spoke of different men entirely. Crickets begin their evening chorus, accompanied by the occasional soft hoot of an owl. The natural sounds form a meditative backdrop as you unroll the blank scroll on a flat stone before you. When you place the brush against the paper, however, something unexpected happens. Ink flows without your guidance, spreading in delicate lines that form characters you recognize as an ancient dialect, once used for forbidden techniques. One who seeks must first understand the nature of seeking itself. The words appear and then fade, sinking into the paper like water into parched earth. You feel no alarm, only a calm curiosity. This is, after all, why you've come, to understand rather than to judge, to witness rather than to condemn. The stories of the snake Sannin are woven into the very fabric of the shinobi world, tales of ambition and brilliance, of cruelty and transcendence. In the distance, beyond the tree line, you notice a faint light moving slowly, perhaps a traveler with a lantern, or something less ordinary. The shinobi world has always existed in the spaces between the seen and unseen, the spoken and the silently understood. You gather your few possessions, securing the scroll and the scale, and decide to follow the distant light. The forest embraces you as you walk, branches creating intricate patterns against the darkening sky. Nocturnal creatures watch your passage with gleaming eyes, but none approach. There is a deliberateness to your journey now, as though the forest itself recognizes your purpose and bends slightly to accommodate it. With each step, you feel the weight of the scale in your pocket, somehow heavier than it should be. The stories you've gathered on your journey replay in your mind. The elderly woman who spoke of a pale young man with kind eyes who healed her daughter when no one else could. The retired ANBU who still wakes screaming from nightmares of laboratories hidden underground. The orphan who was given a home and purpose when all others looked away. The contradictions don't trouble you. People are rarely just one thing, especially those who have lived as long and seen as much as the legendary Sannin. As you follow the bobbing distant light, you understand that you're not merely tracking the physical remnants of Orochimaru's presence in the world, but something more elusive, the impact of a life that refused conventional boundaries, for better and worse. The light you've been following suddenly stops, hovering above a narrow path you hadn't noticed before. When you blink, it separates into several smaller lights, soft blue flames that illuminate a stone pathway leading deeper into the forest. Without hesitation, you follow, understanding that the true journey is only now beginning. You follow the ghostly blue flames as they hover just above the ancient stone path. Their light casts your shadow in multiple directions, as though parts of you are walking separate journeys simultaneously. The deeper you venture into the forest, the more the air changes, becoming heavier with moisture and fragrant with unfamiliar blossoms that only open at night. The path winds between massive trees whose canopies block out the stars, creating a world defined by the immediate circle of blue light and the sound of your footsteps on a worn stone. Occasionally, you hear the distant slither of scales on fallen leaves, a sound that might cause alarm in others, but fills you with a strange anticipation. After what might be minutes or hours, time feels fluid here. The path opens into a clearing dominated by an ancient shrine. Its wooden beams have weathered to silver gray, and stone snake statues guard the entrance, their carved eyes seeming to follow your approach. The blue flames gather at the shrine's entrance, illuminating intricate carvings that depict humans transforming into serpents and back again, an ancient story of metamorphosis and rebirth. You remove your sandals before ascending the worn wooden steps, feeling the smooth texture of wood polished by countless feet over centuries. Inside, the shrine is a single room with a circular stone pedestal at its center. Upon it rests a single white snakeskin, shed intact and coiled in a perfect spiral. The blue flames arrange themselves in a circle around the room's perimeter, casting everything in their cool, pulsing light. When you approach the pedestal, the scale in your pocket grows warmer. You place it beside the shed skin, and immediately, the air in the shrine thickens with chakra, not threatening, but heavy with potential. Like the moment before a summer storm breaks, you've come seeking understanding. A voice speaks from everywhere and nowhere, neither male nor female, neither young nor old. Few do. Most seek judgment, either to condemn or exonerate, but judgment is the refuge of those who fear complexity. You remain silent, knowing this is not a moment for questions, but for listening. The one you seek has worn many skins, shed many identities. The voice continues. To understand even a fragment, you must be willing to shed something of yourself as well. The shed snakeskin on the pedestal begins to glow with a soft, pearlescent light. Without fully understanding why, You extend your hand toward it. The moment your fingers touch the delicate, translucent material, the shrine around you dissolves. You find yourself standing in a classroom at the academy in Konoha, but different from the one you remember. Older, simpler, belonging to a different era. Children sit at wooden desks, their faces turned attentively toward a young dark-haired instructor. Among them, you immediately notice a pale boy with straight black hair and curious golden eyes that seem too ancient for his young face. The boy, Orochimaru as a child, is perfectly still, while others fidget. When the instructor asks a question about chakra theory, his hand rises slowly, deliberately. His answer, when given, reveals not just knowledge, but understanding beyond the textbook explanation. You notice how the other children edge their desks slightly away from his, how their eyes slide past him, as though looking directly at him is uncomfortable. All except one white-haired boy who grins broadly at him, and one blonde girl who studies him with thoughtful eyes. Jiraiya and Tsunade, the future legendary Sannin, though none could know it then. As you watch, the classroom scene dissolves like ink in water, reforming into a forest clearing where the three children, now Jinin, train under the watchful eye of Hiruzen Sarutobi. Young Orochimaru moves with a fluid grace, his techniques already showing the precision and economy of movement that would later become his trademark. He sought perfection in all things, the disembodied voice explains, as you watch the young shinobi practice a complex jutsu, repeating it until every hand sign flows seamlessly into the next. Not out of vanity, but necessity. The world had already shown him its cruelty. The scene shifts again, and you witness a young Orochimaru kneeling before a fresh grave, his face a perfect mask that reveals nothing while concealing everything. No tears fall, but you sense the deep well of emotion behind that controlled exterior. Two figures stand at a respectful distance, his teammates unsure how to comfort someone who rejects comfort. Death was his first teacher, the voice continues. It taught him that all things end, all bonds break, all knowledge dies with its keeper, a lesson he refused to accept. The graveyard dissolves, and now you're in a dimly lit room where scrolls and books cover every surface. A teenage Orochimaru pores over ancient texts, making notes in a precise hand. Outside the window, night turns to day, and back to night in rapid succession, time accelerating to show days, weeks, months of solitary study. Knowledge became his refuge and his weapon, the voice explains. Each fact, each technique mastered, was another barrier between himself and the inevitability of loss. You watch as the young man grows taller, his features sharpening, his experiments becoming more complex. You see his teammates attempt to draw him back into their orbit. Jiraiya, with loud challenges and irreverent jokes, Tsunade, with intellectual debates and quiet concern. Sometimes they succeed, and in those moments, you glimpse what might have been three extraordinary talents united in purpose. But these moments grow rarer as the scenes progress. War comes, rendering the landscape in fire and blood. The three Sannin fight back to back, their combined powers earning them their legendary title. Yet even in these moments of shared triumph, you notice how Orochimaru's eyes are often drawn to the fallen, not with compassion, but with analytical curiosity. Power and knowledge without wisdom becomes a path with no destination, the voice observes, as you watch Orochimaru standing alone on a battlefield, surrounded by both allies and enemies he has outlived. The scene shifts one final time, showing Orochimaru in his laboratory, already beginning the transformations that would make him both more and less than human. His hands perform a forbidden jutsu with the same precise grace that he once practiced basic techniques as a child. He He sought to transcend the limitations that define humanity, the voice says, and in doing so, discovered new limitations he had not anticipated. The vision fades, and you find yourself once again in the shrine. The snake skin on the pedestal has turned to dust, but the scale remains, now glowing with an inner light. This is but one fragment of understanding, the voice tells you. To gather more, you must continue your journey. The next guardian waits, where water meets stone, and time stands still. As the blue flames flicker and fade, you gather the glowing scale and step back into the night, your mind filled with images of a brilliant child who grew into a complicated man. The path ahead is illuminated now, not by supernatural flames, but by the rising moon, casting silver light through the leaves and creating a road of shadow and illumination that leads deeper into the forest. You follow the moonlit path until the sound of flowing water reaches your ears, growing louder with each step. The forest gradually thins, and you emerge onto the bank of a river that cuts through stone, a place where cliffs rise on either side, creating a canyon of smooth, water-carved rock. The moonlight reflects off the dark water, creating a mirror image of the night sky so perfect that it seems you could step down into another world. At the river's edge, a small wooden dock extends a few feet over the water. Sitting at its end is a figure, an elderly man with a fishing rod, his white hair tied in a loose ponytail. He doesn't turn as you approach, but you know he's aware of your presence. The night brings curious travelers, he says, his voice carrying easily over the sound of flowing water, especially those who carry pieces of old stories with them. You join him on the dock, the weathered wood creaking softly beneath your weight. Up close, you notice the man's hands covered in faded scars and ink stains that no amount of scrubbing could remove. A researcher's hands, you think, or perhaps a scribe's. I've been fishing in this spot for 40 years, he says, still not looking at you. The river changes constantly. New water, new fish, new patterns of flow. Yet the river remains the river. An interesting paradox, wouldn't you agree? You show him the glowing scale, and his weathered face breaks into a knowing smile. Ah, you've met the first guardian, the witness, who shows what was. He nods to himself. I am the second guardian, the scribe, who records what is learned. He sets his fishing rod aside and reaches into a worn satchel, producing a bound journal with a faded cover. When he opens it, you see pages filled with elegant calligraphy, some entries recent, others yellowed with age. The snake Sannin passed this way many times over the decades, the old man explains, sometimes as a seeker, sometimes as the sought, sometimes as a teacher, sometimes as a student. I recorded our conversations, though he never asked me to. Memory is precious to those who understand its fragility. He hands you the journal, and as your fingers touch the worn leather binding, the world around you shifts once more. The river, the dock, and the old man fade away, replaced by a series of scenes that unfold like pages turning in an invisible book. You stand in a laboratory carved into the base of a mountain. Complex equipment lines the walls, and scrolls covered in jutsu formulas are spread across several tables. Orochimaru, now a young man in his 20s, works methodically, his movements precise and economical. Across from him stands another figure, a younger version of the fisherman, his hair still dark, his posture straight and proud. The cellular regeneration rate exceeds all previous trials, the younger Orochimaru says, examining a culture under a microscope. With the proper application of chakra, the healing potential could revolutionize battlefield medicine. And the side effects? The younger fisherman asks, making notes in a journal identical to the one you now hold. Manageable, with refinement. Orochimaru's voice is cool, clinical. The third Hokage remains hesitant to approve further trials. Sarutobi-sama sees the potential for misuse. The fisherman observes carefully. A fleeting expression crosses Orochimaru's face. Frustration, perhaps, or disappointment. He sees shadows where I see possibilities. Knowledge is neutral until applied, Takumi. The same research that heals can harm, yes, but to abandon the research entirely is to choose ignorance over wisdom. The scene shifts, years passing in an instant. The laboratory is different now, darker, hidden. The equipment more advanced, but with a makeshift quality. Orochimaru's appearance has begun to change, his features sharper, less human, though his movements maintain that same hypnotic grace. You're crossing lines, Orochimaru-sama, the fisherman, Takumi says, his voice heavy with concern. Lines that exist for reasons beyond mere convention. All progress requires crossing lines, Orochimaru replies, not looking up from his work. The first Hokage crossed lines when he harnessed the power of the tailed beasts. The second crossed lines when he developed the reanimation jutsu. Yet they are revered while I am questioned, because their purpose was the protection of the village. And what is my purpose, if not to advance understanding? Orochimaru finally looks up, his snake-like eyes gleaming in the dim light. The village limits itself with fear disguised as morality. I seek truth without such constraints. The scene changes again. Takumi stands at the same river where you met him, now in his middle years. Orochimaru approaches from the forest, his transformation more complete, his presence carrying a cold power that makes the air itself seem to still. You're leaving Konoha, Takumi says. Not a question. I have outgrown its walls. Orochimaru stands beside him, looking out over the water, as I always knew I would. And those who trusted you, your students, the third, they will adapt, or they won't. Something like regret flickers across Orochimaru's face, quickly mastered. The path of discovery is often walked alone, old friend. Discovery or ambition? Takumi asks quietly. Orochimaru's laugh is soft, almost sad. Is there a difference? Both seek to transcend what is for what could be. More scenes flow past like water. Orochimaru, returning to this spot years later, sometimes to debate philosophical questions with Takumi, sometimes to exchange knowledge, sometimes merely to sit in companionable silence beside someone who neither feared nor worshipped him. In one such scene, they sit side by side on the dock, much as you and the elderly Takumi had been sitting. Do you ever regret the paths not taken? Takumi asks, gray now touching his temples. Orochimaru considers this, his face unreadable. Regret implies one could have chosen differently, given who they were at the moment of choice. I could not have been other than what I am. And what are you, Orochimaru-sama? After all these years of transformation, what remains at your core? The snake Sannin is silent for so long that it seems he might not answer. When he finally speaks, his voice carries an unusual softness. Curiosity, he says simply. The desire to know what lies beyond the next horizon, to understand the mechanisms of life itself. Everything else, power, technique, even this body, is merely the vehicle for that journey. The visions fade, returning you to the present moment. The elderly Takumi still sits beside you, his fishing line creating gentle ripples in the dark water. He is not what most believe him to be, Takumi says, taking the journal back from you. Neither hero nor villain, but something more complex, a force of nature, shaped by human experience, constrained by human limitations, even as he strives to transcend them. He reaches into the water and draws up a smooth, white stone, placing it in your palm, alongside the scale. This is the second fragment. The river stone remembers every current that has shaped it, just as we are shaped by the forces we encounter and resist. You pocket both objects, feeling their combined weight, the scale warm, the stone cool, creating a curious balance. The third guardian awaits where the forest meets the sky. Takumi tells you, returning to his fishing. There, you will learn not what was, nor what is, but what might yet be. As you stand to leave, Takumi speaks one last time, his voice blending with the river's song. Remember, understanding does not require approval. One can comprehend the river without wishing to become it. You leave him there, a solitary figure on the dock, his line cast into waters that have witnessed decades of history. The path leading away from the river climbs steadily upward, winding around the stone cliffs toward higher ground. As you ascend, the air grows cooler and thinner, filled with the scent of pine and the promise of elevation. The scale and the stone in your pocket seem to pulse in alternating rhythm, like a heartbeat accompanying your climb into the mountains where the third guardian waits, and with them, another fragment of understanding about the complicated legacy of the snake Sannin. The path steepens as you climb, winding through stands of pine trees that gradually thin as the altitude increases. Your breath forms small clouds in the cooling air. Above, the stars seem impossibly bright and close, no longer filtered through layers of forest canopy. The moon illuminates your way, casting sharp shadows across the rocky terrain. After hours of climbing, you reach a plateau where the trees give way to a meadow of alpine flowers that shouldn't be blooming in this season, white and purple blossoms that glow softly in the moonlight. At the meadow's center stands a single, massive tree, unlike any you've seen before, its bark white as bone, its leaves a shimmering silver that produces a delicate melody as they move in the high-altitude breeze. Beneath this impossible tree sits a young woman with striking features, high cheekbones, intelligent eyes, and hair the color of midnight. She wears the simple robes of a temple priestess, though no temple exists in this remote place. A scroll lies open across her lap, the characters upon it shifting and changing as though alive. The seeker arrives with fragments of past and present, she says, her voice carrying the same musical quality as the leaves above. But do they come ready to glimpse what might be? You approach and sit across from her on the soft grass. When you produce the scale and the river stone, she nods approvingly. I am the third guardian, she tells you, the seer who perceives possibilities yet unmanifested. She gestures to the scroll in her lap. The future is not fixed, but fluid, 1,000 rivers flowing from each present moment. Some channels run stronger than others, carved deep by the weight of past choices, but none are inevitable. The woman, the seer, places her hands over yours, covering the scale and stone. Her touch is neither warm nor cold, but seems to vibrate with potential energy. The one whose path you trace has stood at many crossroads, she says, and stands at another now, perhaps the most significant of all. To understand him fully, you must glimpse not just what was and what is, but what might yet be. When she removes her hands, the scale and stone have merged into a single object, a small orb that contains swirling patterns of opalescence and earthen tones. As you stare into its depths, the meadow, the tree, and the seer fade from your perception. You find yourself in a landscape both familiar and strange. Konoha, but not as you've known it. The village has expanded, new buildings rising alongside the traditional structures. The Hokage monument now bears 7 faces, the newest unfamiliar to you. People walk the streets in clothing styles you've never seen, though the forehead protectors and flak jackets of shinobi remain recognizable. Among them walks Orochimaru, his appearance much as you last saw him in the history book, yet somehow different. The cold ambition that once radiated from him has mellowed into something more contemplative. He moves through the village openly, though you notice how conversations pause as he passes, how paths subtly alter to maintain distance. A young shinobi approaches him, a jonin with a face that carries echoes of the Uchiha clan, though not one you recognize. They speak briefly, the younger man showing deference, but not fear. Orochimaru nods and continues on his way, his destination becoming clear as he approaches the research division of Konoha Hospital. Inside, medical nin and scientists work alongside each other, their combined expertise focused on projects displayed on charts and contained in specialized equipment. Orochimaru moves among them like a living legend, respected, consulted, but held at an emotional distance, born of history too significant to forget. In one corner, a group works on prosthetic limbs that integrate with the chakra network. In another, researchers study cellular regeneration techniques. Orochimaru pauses longest at a station where a team examines what appears to be a new antidote for poisons that target the nervous system. His knowledge returned to serve the village he once abandoned. A voice explains, the seer, though you cannot see her, not out of sentimentality, but pragmatism. The world changed, and so did he, adapting as he always has. The scene shifts to a traditional house on the outskirts of the village. Inside, Orochimaru kneels at a low table, sharing tea with a white-haired man whose weathered face bears the distinctive red markings of the Inuzuka clan. Mitsuki sends his regards, the visitor says. His research in the land of water progresses well. Something softens in Orochimaru's expression, the closest to genuine warmth you've seen. He always did have an affinity for water-based techniques. His brother, still serving as the Kazukage's advisor, he asked me to deliver this. The visitor produces a scroll, sealed with the mark of Sunagakure. The scene shifts again. Orochimaru stands alone in a private laboratory, more austere than his previous workspaces. On a desk rests a photograph, faded, creased from handling, showing 3 young ninja with their sensei, the legendary Sannin in their youth, with the 3rd Hokage looking proudly upon them. His fingers trace the image of Jiraiya, then Tsunade, a complex emotion passing across his face that might be regret or something adjacent to it. Some paths cannot be retraced, the seer's voice explains. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. He understands this now in ways he could not before. Another shift, and you witness Orochimaru standing before the memorial stone, its surface now covered with many more names than you remember. He places a single white lily at its base, a gesture so simple, yet so incongruous with the man described in history books that it momentarily disorienting. A figure appears beside him, Kakashi Hatake, his hair now completely silver, his posture slightly stooped with age, but his eye still sharp. I never expected to outlive you, Orochimaru says, his tone dry, but not unkind. Technically, you haven't, Kakashi replies. You've just changed containers more often. A ghost of a smile touches Orochimaru's lips. Semantics. They stand in silence for a moment, 2 old shinobi contemplating mortality in their own ways. Do you regret any of it? Kakashi finally asks. Orochimaru considers this. Regret is a luxury for those who imagine they could have been something other than what they are. He pauses. But I have reassessed certain choices with the perspective of time. The scene dissolves once more, reforming into a moonlit forest, clearing where Orochimaru sits in meditation. His eyes are closed, his breathing slow and measured. Around him, white snakes move in lazy circles, their scales gleaming like pearls in the diffuse light. He seeks now what eluded him before, the seer's voice tells you. Not immortality of the body, but understanding of the spirit. The questions have changed, though the seeking continues. A final shift brings you to a scene unlike the others, less distinct, more impressionistic, as though viewing a painting still being created. Orochimaru stands at a crossroads, literal and metaphorical. Behind him lie the paths he has already walked. Before him stretch new possibilities, each glowing with different potential. This is the present moment, the seer explains, where past meets possibility. The choices he makes now will determine which future manifests from all those that might be. You watch as Orochimaru contemplates the paths before him. There is a stillness to him now that wasn't present in earlier visions, not the cold stillness of a predator waiting to strike, but the quiet centeredness of one who has learned to observe before acting. The vision fades, returning you to the high meadow beneath the white tree. The seer still sits across from you, but now a third object rests beside the merged scale and stone, a small silver key that gleams with its own inner light. The key to understanding opens many doors, she tells you, placing it in your hand, including those we fear to approach. As your fingers close around the key, you feel a subtle shift in your perception, as though viewing the world through multiple lenses simultaneously, each offering a different perspective on the same reality. The fourth guardian awaits, where shadow meets reflection, the seer says, her form already beginning to fade like morning mist under sunlight. There, you will find not what others believe of him, but what he believes of himself. The meadow remains, but the seer and the impossible tree vanish, leaving you alone under the vast night sky. The combined object in your hand, scale, stone, and key, pulses with a gentle rhythm that matches your heartbeat. It points you toward a narrow path leading down the opposite side of the mountain, where darkness gathers most deeply. As you begin your descent, the alpine flowers close their petals as though returning to their natural winter dormancy. Now that the guardian's presence has departed, the night grows deeper around you, but the object you carry provides just enough light to illuminate the next few steps of your journey, a fitting metaphor, you think, for understanding itself. The descent from the mountain follows a different path than your ascent, steeper, less traveled, winding through sharp rock formations that cast complex shadows in the moonlight. The combined objects you carry, scale, stone, and key, emit a soft glow that illuminates just enough of the path to keep you moving forward. As you descend, the air grows warmer and heavier with moisture. The sound of your footsteps changes from the crunch of rocky soil to the soft give of moss and loam. Eventually, the path levels out, leading you through a dense bamboo forest where stalks rise like pale sentinels in the darkness, their leaves whispering secrets you can almost, but not quite, understand. After what seems like hours of walking, the bamboo suddenly ends at the edge of a perfectly circular pool. The water is so still, it appears solid, its black surface reflecting the stars above with perfect clarity. At the pool's center stands a small island with a single torii gate, its vermilion paint faded to the color of dried blood. You pause at the water's edge, uncertain how to proceed, when the objects in your hand pulse more brightly. In response, stepping stones appear on the water's surface, or perhaps they were always there, only now visible in the light you carry. Each stone bears a symbol as you cross. First a snake coiled in a circle, then a brush and scroll, then a mirror facing both ways, and finally, a mask with no features. The water remains perfectly still as you pass, not a single ripple marking your crossing, despite the stones seeming to float upon its surface. The island is barely large enough for the torii gate, and a small stone bench beneath it. Sitting on this bench is a figure unlike the previous guardians, neither old nor young, neither male nor female, wearing a robe of shifting colors that never settle into a definite hue. Most disconcerting is their face, blank and featureless, like a smooth egg. The fourth guardian comes to meet the seeker, the figure says, their voice emanating not from where a mouth should be, but from the air around you. I am the mirror who reflects truth without judgment. You sit beside this strange entity, feeling neither fear nor comfort in their presence, only a profound neutrality, as though you've entered a space beyond normal emotional reactions. The one you seek to understand has gazed into many mirrors, the mirror says. Some showed what he wished to see, others revealed what he feared to acknowledge. Few reflected truth without distortion. You present the combined objects, scale, stone, and key. The mirror nods, their featureless face somehow conveying approval. These fragments contain perspectives from without, they say. Now you must glimpse the view from within, how he sees himself when no eyes but his own are watching. The mirror raises featureless hands to their blank face and appears to peel it away like a mask, revealing not a human countenance beneath, but a swirling vortex of silver light. This light extends toward the objects you hold, enveloping them and you in its mercurial glow. The world dissolves around you, reforming into a space like no other you've experienced. Neither physical location nor genjutsu illusion, but something between thought and reality. You exist now within Orochimaru's mindscape, witnessing not his actions, but his inner experience. The landscape of his consciousness is vast and labyrinthine, corridors of knowledge extending in all directions, chambers of memory, both locked and open, bridges connecting disparate concepts in unexpected ways. Everything is in motion, rearranging itself continuously like a living library. You perceive how he experiences himself, not as the monster of children's nightmares or the ambitious villain of Konoha's history books, but as a seeker navigating an endless sea of questions. His consciousness catalogs everything, analyzing, dissecting, reassembling. Nothing is accepted without examination. Nothing is discarded without consideration of its potential value. You feel his fascination with transformation, not merely of bodies, but of ideas, of perspectives, of possibilities. Change is not something he fears, but something he reveres, the only constant in an existence defined by exploration. Deeper still, you encounter the emotional landscape he keeps carefully contained, not absent, as many believe, but precisely regulated. Passion flows, not toward people, but toward discovery. Attachment exists, not for individuals, but for knowledge itself. Yet beneath these redirected emotions lie memories of connections long severed, his parents, lost in early childhood, teammates whose paths diverged from his, students who both disappointed and surprised him. You witness his perception of time, elastic, relative, a constraint to be understood and eventually transcended. Death appears in his mindscape not as an enemy to be feared, but as a problem to be solved, a limitation to be overcome through sufficient understanding of life's mechanisms. Most revealing is how he perceives his own journey, not as a fall from grace or a villain's ascension, but as a continuous evolution guided by a single unifying principle, the pursuit of knowledge without the constraints of conventional morality or human limitation. The experience shifts, and you find yourself within specific memories, but experienced from within rather than observed from without. A young Orochimaru discovering a white snake skin in the forest near his parents' fresh graves, the first stirring of understanding that transformation might offer escape from loss. The moment he realized his research would never be accepted within Konoha's ethical framework, not anger, but cold calculation, weighing potential knowledge against institutional constraints and finding the latter wanting. The first successful body transfer, triumph mingled with disappointment that immortality purchased through such means still carried limitations he hadn't anticipated. His observation of Sasuke Uchiha, seeing in the boy not merely a potential vessel, but a reflection of his own younger self, creating a complex resonance of identification and instrumentalization. The years of reflection following the Fourth Great Ninja War, reassessment, not from moral awakening, but from pragmatic recognition that adaptation serves exploration better than rigid adherence to previous methods. Throughout all these fragments of inner experience runs a consistent thread, an almost transcendent curiosity that borders on the spiritual. For Orochimaru, understanding the universe's mechanisms is not merely scientific ambition, but something approaching reverence. The silver light recedes, returning you to the island with the Torii Gate. The mirror sits beside you, their blank face now bearing a single vertical line, neither smile nor frown, but an acknowledgement of division between inner and outer perception. Now, you have seen through his eyes, the mirror says, not to justify, but to comprehend. The outer world sees actions, only the inner eye perceives intentions. Both perspectives contain partial truths. The objects in your hand have transformed again, now forming a small pendant shaped like a coiled snake with eyes of opal. It feels neither warm nor cool, but perfectly balanced between temperatures. This is the fourth fragment, the mirror tells you, the reflection that contains both observed and observer. You pocket the pendant, feeling its weight settle against your chest like a newfound awareness. The fifth guardian awaits where broken things are made whole, the mirror says, their form already becoming translucent. There you will learn what is lost and what remains when all else falls away. As the mirror fades completely, the stepping stones across the pool rearrange themselves, forming a different path that leads not back the way you came, but toward a gap in the bamboo forest you hadn't noticed before. The Torii Gate behind you creaks softly in a breeze you cannot feel, as though urging you onward. You cross the stepping stones, each footfall creating the smallest ripple that quickly smooths itself away. The black water beneath seems deeper than physically possible, containing reflections of stars you don't recognize from any sky you've seen. Entering the new path through the bamboo, you feel the pendant against your chest pulse once, twice, then settle into a rhythm that matches your breathing. The understanding you've gathered feels substantial, yet incomplete, like a puzzle with important pieces still missing. The bamboo thins as you walk, giving way to a landscape of gentle hills covered in tall grasses that wave like a golden sea in the pre-dawn light. Somewhere ahead, the fifth guardian waits with another fragment of understanding about the complicated legacy of the snake Sannin. The tall grasses part before you as you walk, creating a path that seems to form with each step and disappear behind you. The eastern sky lightens gradually, turning from deep indigo to pale lavender. A gentle mist hugs the contours of the rolling hills, giving the landscape an ethereal quality, neither fully solid nor entirely dreamlike. After walking for what might be minutes or hours in this timeless place, you crest a hill and pause at the site below. In a shallow valley rests the ruins of what must once have been a magnificent compound. Stone foundations, half-collapsed walls, broken pillars that once supported grand roofs. Nature has reclaimed much of it, with vines embracing fallen beams and wildflowers growing from cracks in the stonework. At the center of these ruins stands a perfectly intact building, a small, traditional house with paper screens and a tiled roof, surrounded by a carefully maintained garden. The incongruity of this pristine structure amid devastation draws you forward. As you approach, you notice details that mark this as no ordinary dwelling. The garden contains medicinal herbs arranged with scientific precision rather than aesthetic concern. The wooden engawa surrounding the house bears faded markings that you recognize as sealing jutsu formula. Most telling is the family crest beside the entrance, a stylized white snake forming a circle. Sitting on the engawa is a woman in her middle years, her hands busy with a task you can't immediately identify. As you draw closer, you see she is repairing a broken ceramic bowl using gold lacquer, carefully joining the pieces to create something new from what was shattered. Her face, when she looks up at your approach, carries lines of both hardship and laughter, her eyes dark and knowing. The seeker arrives with 4 fragments, she says, setting aside her work. I am the 5th guardian, the healer, who understands what can be mended and what must remain broken. You join her on the engawa, removing your sandals as custom dictates. The pendant you carry pulses warmly as you sit beside her, responding to her presence. This place, you say, gesturing to the ruins surrounding the intact house, was once the compound of the Ryuchi clan, she explains, Orochimaru's maternal ancestors. Though few know this connection, their knowledge of medicine and transformation techniques was unrivaled and feared. During the wars before the village system, they were nearly wiped out. The survivors scattered, their knowledge fragmented. She picks up the broken bowl again, continuing her careful repair work as she speaks. Some fragments of ourselves cannot be restored once broken. Some losses permanently alter our shape. The question becomes, what do we create from what remains? As she applies the golden lacquer to another crack in the ceramic, the pendant in your hand grows warm. When you look down, you see it responding to her work, glowing with the same golden light as the repaired seams in the bowl. To understand him fully, she says, you must witness how loss shaped him, and how he shaped himself around that loss. She takes the pendant from you and places it in the center of the broken bowl. Immediately, the world around you shifts, the ruins and the pristine house fading away. You find yourself in a modest home where a young woman with striking golden eyes sits reading to a small boy, Orochimaru, as a very young child, perhaps 4 or 5 years old. His face, not yet elongated by experimentation, shows an almost fragile beauty and intense concentration as he listens to tales of legendary healers who could cure any disease, restore any injury. His mother was a gifted medical nin, the healer's voice explains. Though you cannot see her, she carried the diluted bloodline of the Ryuchi clan and sought to preserve their knowledge of medicine rather than their more controversial techniques. The scene shifts to the same room, now empty of people, but filled with scrolls and books. Young Orochimaru sits alone, reading texts clearly meant for much older students, his small fingers tracing complex diagrams of human anatomy. Through the window, you glimpse 2 fresh graves in the small garden. The plague that swept through that region took both his parents within days of each other. The healer continues. No medical technique could save them, a harsh lesson for a child who believed knowledge could overcome any obstacle. You watch as the orphaned boy continues his parents' research, initially driven by a child's simple belief that if he learns enough, he might bring them back. Days blur into months, seasons into years, the solitary child growing into a solitary young man whose brilliance attracts attention, even as his intensity creates distance. The original wound shapes all that follows, the healer's voice observes. His first experience of loss taught him that conventional knowledge had limits he found unacceptable. The visions move forward, showing Orochimaru's gradually evolving research. What began as a child's desperate attempt to reverse death becomes a young man's methodical exploration of life's boundaries. You witness his growing frustration with Konoha's restrictions on certain areas of research, his increasingly secretive experiments, his slow drift from innovation toward transgression. He sought to mend what cannot be mended, the healer explains, as you watch Orochimaru's first forbidden experiments, to restore what must remain broken. In refusing to accept the most fundamental boundary between life and death, he crossed many others. The scenes continue, showing moments you've glimpsed before, but with new context. His development of the reanimation jutsu, his body modification techniques, his ultimate development of the body transfer method. Each innovation is revealed not merely as ambition, but as response to that original wound, the child who could not save his parents, becoming the man determined to transcend all natural limitations. Yet, even as he transgressed boundaries, he created knowledge that would eventually save countless lives, the healer notes. You witness scenes of medical nin using techniques derived from his research to heal injuries once considered fatal, to develop antidotes for poisons once deemed incurable, to repair chakra networks damaged beyond conventional treatment. This is his contradiction, the healer says. Methods born of personal trauma and ethical transgression yielded knowledge that, in other hands, served healing rather than harm. The broken bowl, repaired with gold, becomes both more and less than it was originally, never the same, but perhaps more valuable for having been broken. The visions shift to more recent times. Orochimaru works in a laboratory that bears the mark of Konoha. Though he wears no forehead protector, his research now focuses on healing techniques, his methods still unorthodox, but his aims apparently reconstructed. After decades of running from his original wound, he began the slow process of integration, the healer explains. Not healing. Some breaks cannot be truly healed, but acknowledgement, acceptance, and adaptation. You see him mentoring young researchers, sharing knowledge that once he would have jealously guarded. His teaching style remains demanding, sometimes harsh, but his willingness to pass on understanding suggests a shift in perspective from knowledge as power to knowledge as legacy. The final vision shows Orochimaru alone in a garden, very similar to the one surrounding the house in the ruins. He kneels before a small shrine, placing fresh flowers before two weathered stones. After all the transformations, all the bodies inhabited, his expression as he honors his parents' memory contains something rarely seen on his face, a quiet vulnerability, quickly mastered, but undeniably present. The visions fade, returning you to the Ingawa beside the healer. The broken bowl between you is now complete, its cracks filled with gold that catches the light of the rising sun. The pendant rests at its center, now bearing a pattern of golden lines that match the bowl's repairs. This is the fifth fragment, the healer says, returning the transformed pendant to you. Understanding that requires us to see both the break and the repair, both the wound and the response. You accept the pendant, feeling its complex texture, smooth in some places, ridged with golden seams in others. The sixth guardian waits where enemies rest as equals, the healer tells you, returning to her work of repairing broken things. There you will learn of bonds severed and maintained across boundaries others cannot cross. As you stand to leave, the healer speaks once more. Remember, a life cannot be judged solely by its darkest moments, nor by its brightest achievements. Truth lies in the complete pattern, broken places and all. You step off the Ngawa, bowing in respect to the healer and her work. As you walk away from the house, you notice the ruins around it differently now, not merely as destruction, but as evidence of what once existed and what might be rebuilt in different form. The path, leading away from the valley, winds between ancient trees whose massive roots have disrupted stone walkways laid centuries ago. Life continuing, adapting, transforming around the remnants of what came before. The pendant against your chest seems to pulse in rhythm with this understanding as you follow the path toward the sixth guardian. The path winds through increasingly familiar territory, the landscape transitioning from ancient forest to the outskirts of cultivated land. Stone markers occasionally appear along the way, worn smooth by time, but still bearing faint symbols of Konoha. You're approaching the village, though from an angle you've rarely traveled. The pendant grows warmer as you crest a gentle hill and see your destination below. The memorial grounds on the village outskirts, where generations of shinobi rest. The cemetery is larger than you remember, with sections that appear to have been added in recent years. Stone monuments rise among carefully tended gardens, some elaborate, others simple. All bear witness to lives given in service to the village or to ideals greater than themselves. As you enter through the ornate gates, you notice the grounds are empty of visitors, save for a single figure kneeling before a monument in the oldest section. Even from a distance, there is something familiar about their posture, an elegant economy of movement that speaks of disciplined power held in perfect control. Drawing closer, you recognize the distinctive silver hair and face mask of Kakashi Hatake, though he appears older than when you last saw him, with deeper lines visible around his visible eye. He doesn't look up as you approach, continuing to arrange a small bouquet of flowers at the base of a monument that bears many names. The seeker arrives with 5 fragments, he says, his voice the same lazy drawl you remember, though perhaps carrying more weight of experience. I am the 6th guardian, the comrade who understands bonds forged in shared purpose. You kneel beside him, noting that he wears simple civilian clothes rather than the shinobi attire or Hokage robes you might have expected. The pendant around your neck pulses gently as though greeting an old friend. An interesting journey you've undertaken, Kakashi comments, finally turning to look at you, seeking to understand someone most prefer to simply judge. You knew him, you say. Not a question. I knew versions of him, Kakashi corrects, his eye crinkling slightly in what might be a smile beneath his mask. As enemy, as reluctant ally, as a puzzle never fully solved. Few alive can claim to have seen as many facets of Orochimaru as I have, though whether I understood what I saw is another question entirely. He gestures to the pendant you wear. May I? When you remove it and place it in his outstretched hand, he examines it carefully, turning it to catch the light. 5 fragments already gathered, he muses, the witness of history, the record of exchanges, the glimpse of possibilities, the reflection of self-perception, and the understanding of what breaks and what mends. He returns the pendant to you. My contribution will be the 6th, the recognition of connections that persist, despite everything that should sever them. As his fingers brush against yours in the exchange, the cemetery around you dissolves, replaced by a series of visions, unlike those you've experienced with previous guardians. These feel more immediate, less mystical, memories viewed through the sharp, analytical lens of the copy ninja's mind. The first shows a much younger Kakashi, still an Anbu captain, observing Orochimaru from the shadows. The snake Sannin works in his laboratory, unaware of the surveillance, or perhaps simply unconcerned by it. What strikes you is the professional assessment in Kakashi's observation. Not fear or disgust, but recognition of exceptional skill coupled with dangerous ambition. I was assigned to monitor him in the months before he left Konoha, Kakashi's voice explains. I recognized in him something I had seen in myself after my father's death and my teammates' losses, a brilliance turned inward, seeking solutions to problems most accept as insoluble. The scene shifts to a forest clearing years later, where Kakashi faces Orochimaru directly, a tense confrontation where neither is at full strength, both calculating odds and possibilities. We crossed paths many times over the years, Kakashi continues, sometimes as direct opponents, sometimes pursuing parallel objectives. Always, there was a current of mutual recognition. Two shinobi who understood the darkness that can drive a gifted mind toward obsession. More scenes flow past. Orochimaru providing critical intelligence during a crisis, Kakashi using knowledge gleaned from the Sannin's abandoned research to counter a threat, moments of tense cooperation during the Fourth Great Ninja War, where former enemies found themselves fighting for shared survival. What most never understood about Orochimaru, Kakashi observes, was that his break with Konoha wasn't a simple betrayal, but a complex separation. He never sought the village's destruction, as other rogue nin did, merely its transcendence. In his mind, he was pursuing knowledge that would eventually benefit humanity, even if his methods were unacceptable to those same humans. The visions continue, showing more recent interactions. Kakashi, as Hokage, receiving intelligence from Orochimaru's network, diplomatic exchanges that acknowledged complex history without being constrained by it, moments where decades of shared context allowed for understanding that transcended conventional alliance or enmity. There exists between a long-lived shinobi a bond that isn't friendship, but something adjacent to it, Kakashi explains. A recognition that we've witnessed the same transformations of the world, survived the same wars, lost people to the same conflicts. It creates a connection that persists even between those who have stood on opposite sides. The final vision shows an unexpected scene. Orochimaru and Kakashi sitting together on the Hokage monument after Kakashi's retirement, sharing sake as the sun sets over Konoha. Their conversation is quiet, reflective, touching on philosophical questions rather than village politics. Neither fully trusts the other, yet both value the rare opportunity to speak with someone who comprehends the weight of their respective journeys. I've seen him change, Kakashi says, as the visions fade, returning you to the cemetery, not through moral epiphany or sentimental redemption, but through the same analytical process that drove his original research. He reassessed his methods when they proved suboptimal for his goals. He adapted when circumstances required it. The cold brilliance that once made him dangerous now makes him valuable, precisely because he views problems from angles others cannot or will not consider. The pendant in your hand has transformed again, now bearing a stylized symbol that resembles the Konoha leaf crossed with a snake, representing connection across apparent opposition. This is the sixth fragment, Kakashi tells you, rising to his feet with the fluid grace that belies his age, the understanding that connections persist beyond conventional categories of ally and enemy, beyond simplistic judgments of right and wrong. You stand as well, tucking the pendant back beneath your clothing, feeling its comforting weight against your skin. The seventh guardian awaits, where new life begins from old foundations, Kakashi says, his eye once again crinkling in that familiar, almost smile. There you will learn of legacy, what we pass on, and what we leave behind. He turns back to the memorial stone, his attention returning to his own private communion with the past. You leave him there among the monuments, understanding that for shinobi like Kakashi and like Orochimaru, the dead are never truly gone, but remain present in memory, in technique, in the accumulated wisdom passed from generation to generation. The path, leading from the cemetery, takes you toward the village proper, though it curves before reaching the main gates. Following the outer wall, the pendant guides you, growing warmer as you take correct turns, cooler when you stray from the intended route. As you walk, you consider the fragments of understanding you've gathered, each providing a different perspective on a man history has simplified into either villain or genius, rarely acknowledging he might be both simultaneously and more besides. The pendant seems heavier now, dense with accumulated insight, yet you sense it remains incomplete as you make your way toward the seventh guardian and the next piece of this complex puzzle. The path leads you along Konoha's outer wall until you reach a section that appears newer than the rest, rebuilt after one of the many attacks the village has weathered over the decades. Here, the wall curves around a modest compound that sits neither fully inside nor outside the village boundaries, a symbolic positioning that feels deliberate. The compound consists of several low buildings arranged around a central courtyard. Unlike the traditional architecture of most Konoha structures, these blend multiple cultural influences: curved roofs reminiscent of the Land of Sound, stone foundations in the style of the Land of Earth, gardens that echo the Land of Water's aesthetic. It is a place that belongs everywhere and nowhere, much like its presumed inhabitant. As you approach the open gate, you notice young people moving between the buildings, teenagers and young adults engaged in various activities. Some practice jutsu in a training area, others tend gardens of medicinal plants, while still others pore over scrolls beneath shade trees. All wear simple uniforms, without forehead protectors or village symbols. In the center of the courtyard stands a woman you recognize immediately, though she has aged since you last saw her. Tsunade, the legendary medical nin and former 5th Hokage, observes the young people with a critical eye, occasionally offering direction or correction. Her blonde hair now carries streaks of silver, but her posture remains proud, her presence commanding. She notices your arrival and approaches, her amber eyes taking in the pendant visible at your neck. The seeker arrives with 6 fragments, she says, her voice carrying the authority that once guided the entire village. I am the 7th guardian, the peer, who witnessed the journey from its beginning. You bow respectfully. This is, after all, one of the legendary Sannin, regardless of her current role as guardian. She acknowledges the gesture with a nod before gesturing for you to walk with her through the compound. This is the Transformation Institute, she explains, as you pass groups of focused young students, established to study healing techniques, physical enhancement, and chakra manipulation, all under ethical oversight. And Orochimaru, you ask, noting how some of the students bear subtle markers of various clans: Inuzuka, facial markings, Yamanaka blonde hair, even the distinctive pale eyes of the Hyuga. This is part of his legacy, Tsunade says, her expression complex, neither approval nor condemnation, but something more nuanced, knowledge reclaimed from darkness, structured to serve rather than exploit. I oversee the curriculum and ethical boundaries. He provides research and occasional instruction, though always under supervision. She leads you to a small garden enclosed by bamboo screens, where a stone bench sits beside a koi pond. As you both sit, she studies the pendant you wear. 6 fragments gathered, she observes. You've learned much about him already. My contribution will be perhaps the most personal, the perspective of one who knew him before and after, who walked beside him and against him, who understands the continuity beneath the transformation. When her fingers touch the pendant, the garden around you fades, replaced by visions from Tsunade's memories, sharper, more intimate, and spanning a longer time frame than any you've witnessed before. You see three young genin, Tsunade, Orochimaru, and Jiraiya, meeting for the first time, sizing each other up with a direct assessment of children. Young Tsunade notices immediately how Orochimaru holds himself apart, his golden eyes observing rather than participating, his rare smiles never reaching those eyes. He was different from the beginning, Tsunade's voice explains, not merely in appearance or ability, but in how he engaged with the world, as though constantly translating between his internal reality and the external one, never quite fluent in the language others spoke naturally. The memories flow forward, training sessions where Orochimaru mastered techniques with unnerving speed, missions where his tactical brilliance saved his teammates, quiet moments where Jiraiya's boisterous attempts to draw him out met with cool tolerance rather than genuine connection. Jiraiya tried hardest to reach him, Tsunade recalls, a note of old grief coloring her voice. He sensed the isolation Orochimaru wrapped around himself and battered against it relentlessly. Sometimes, rarely, he succeeded, moments where Orochimaru would reveal a dry wit or unexpected insight that reminded us he was more than the perfect shinobi he presented to the world. You witness one such moment, the three Sannin as teenagers, resting after a difficult mission, Jiraiya making outrageous claims about his prowess with women, Tsunade threatening bodily harm, and Orochimaru watching with apparent disinterest until he delivers a single, perfectly timed observation that leaves Jiraiya sputtering and Tsunade laughing despite herself. We were bonded by circumstance and kept together by Sarutobi-sensei's wisdom, Tsunade continues, as the visions show the three growing into their legendary status. But we were never truly a team of equals. Jiraiya and I connected despite our differences. Orochimaru remained a colleague rather than a friend, respected, relied upon, but never fully known. The memories shift to darker times, Tsunade beginning to notice changes in Orochimaru's research interests, questions that probed at ethical boundaries, experiments that required increasing secrecy. I was too absorbed in my own work to recognize the warning signs, she admits, and perhaps I didn't want to see them. It was easier to focus on his brilliance than to question his methods. You witness her gradual distancing from Konoha after losing her loved ones, her parallel journey away from the village that had once been home. Her perspective shifts to encounters with Orochimaru during her self-imposed exile, brief, tense meetings where neither acknowledged the bond that once existed, both playing roles that had calcified around them. We both left Konoha, but by different paths and for different reasons, Tsunade observes. My escape was from pain. His was toward possibility. I ran from the past. He ran toward a future only he could envision. The memories advance to her return as fifth Hokage, confrontations during critical moments in the village's history, and eventually to the fragile alliance forged during the Fourth Great Ninja War. Fighting alongside him again after so many years was disorienting, she admits. The familiar rhythms were still there, his precision complementing my power, his strategy enhancing my instinct. Muscle memory doesn't forget, even when the heart has moved on. The final sequences show more recent interactions, tense negotiations establishing the Transformation Institute, careful cooperation on healing techniques that combined his innovation with her ethical framework, moments of unexpected accord where decades of shared history allowed for communication beyond words. What few understand about Orochimaru, Tsunade says, as the visions begin to fade, is that beneath all the transformations, a consistent core remains. The brilliant, isolated child became the brilliant, isolated man. The seeker of knowledge never stopped seeking, merely adjusted his methods. When the original approach proved costly, you returned to the garden beside the koi pond, the pendant now bearing a new addition, a small, diamond-shaped mark that resembles the one on Tsunade's forehead, symbol of stored power and potential. This is the 7th fragment, she tells you, her expression solemn. The recognition of continuity across transformation, understanding that change and constancy exist simultaneously. She stands, indicating it's time to continue your journey. The 8th guardian awaits where the future studies the past. There you will learn how legacy takes form in those who come after. As you prepare to leave, Tsunade speaks once more, her voice carrying the weight of decades of experience. We were called the legendary Sannin, granted equal status in the histories, but we were never truly equal. Jiraiya surpassed us in heart, I in healing, Orochimaru in vision. His tragedy and his triumph was seeing too far, reaching too high, refusing limitations others accepted as immutable. She turns back to observe her students, her posture straightening as she resumes her role as instructor and guide. You leave her there, overseeing the ethical application of knowledge that once developed in darkness, perhaps the most unexpected legacy of the Snake Sannin's complicated journey. The pendant directs you toward the village center now, growing warmer as you approach the heart of Konoha. Its weight against your chest feels significant. 7 fragments of understanding, now combined into a more complete picture, though you sense the final pieces remain to be gathered before the full pattern emerges. The pendant leads you into Konoha proper, through streets that have changed over the years. Some widened to accommodate increased traffic, others rebuilt after various attacks, new businesses standing alongside establishments that have served the village for generations. Citizens and shinobi alike move about their daily business, the rhythms of village life continuing regardless of which legendary figures rise or fall or transform. Your path takes you toward the academic district, where the Ninja Academy stands alongside research facilities and libraries. The pendant grows warmest as you approach a modern building adjacent to the academy, the Konoha Historical Institute. According to the sign at its entrance, large windows reveal multiple floors of archives, research spaces, and interactive displays chronicling the village's complex history. Inside, the main hall features exhibits dedicated to each era of Konoha's development, from its founding by Hashirama and Madara through the reigns of 7 Hokages and the various wars that shaped the shinobi world. You notice that even the darker chapters are presented without sanitization, including the Uchiha massacre, Orochimaru's experiments, and the pain attack that once destroyed the village entirely. As you move through the exhibit on the legendary Sannin, a young man approaches, perhaps in his early 20s, with sharp eyes behind scholarly glasses and an air of contained energy. He wears the standard uniform of a Konoha Jonin, though the numerous scrolls and books he carries suggest his specialization lies in research rather than combat. The seeker arrives with 7 fragments, he says, his voice carrying surprising authority for his age. I am the 8th guardian, the inheritor, who studies the past to guide the future. He introduces himself as Sarutobi Konohamaru, a name you recognize as belonging to the grandson of the 3rd Hokage, now grown into a respected shinobi in his own right. The pendant at your chest pulses in recognition, responding to his bloodline connection to one who knew Orochimaru perhaps better than anyone. My grandfather left extensive records, Konohamaru explains, leading you to a private research room filled with scrolls, photographs, and artifacts, not just official reports, but personal observations, private correspondences, the human story behind the historical record. He gestures to the materials spread across a large table. I've spent years studying these, trying to understand not just what happened, but why. How a shinobi my grandfather considered his most brilliant student became his greatest regret. The pendant grows warm as Konohamaru examines it, his expression thoughtful. 7 fragments already gathered, he observes. My contribution will be the 8th. How the legacy of complicated figures shapes those who come after them. How we integrate the brilliant and the terrible into our understanding of ourselves. When he touches the pendant, the research room around you transforms, but differently than with previous guardians. Rather than being immersed in memories, you stand with Konohamaru in a space like a 3-dimensional timeline, historical moments arranged around you as tangible scenes you can observe from multiple angles. This is how I've come to visualize history, Konohamaru explains. Not linear, but interconnected, each event casting influence forward and backward through time. He guides you through key moments in Orochimaru's relationship with the village, viewed not through personal memory, but through historical analysis, examining causes and effects, influences and reactions. You see young Hiruzen, Sarutobi, recognizing extraordinary potential in the orphaned boy, providing special training, nurturing abilities that already exceeded many adult shinobi. You witness his pride in Orochimaru's accomplishments, his growing concern over his students' methods, his eventual heartbreaking decision to act against someone he had loved like a son. My grandfather's greatest blind spot was his attachment, Konohamaru observes, as you watch the 3rd Hokage struggle with decisions regarding his former student. He saw the warning signs, but couldn't bring himself to act decisively until it was too late. His love clouded his judgment, something he acknowledged in his private journals. The perspective shifts to show how Orochimaru's actions influenced village policy for decades. Stricter oversight of research, ANBU surveillance protocols, the development of containment techniques for rogue shinobi. His shadow loomed over Konoha long after his physical departure. His influence extends beyond his direct actions, Konohamaru continues. Consider how Anko Mitarashi's entire career was shaped by her experience as his student, how Kabuto Yakushi's identity formed around his relationship with Orochimaru, how even Naruto Uzumaki's understanding of Sasuke was filtered through the threat Orochimaru represented. The timeline expands to show these ripple effects, how Orochimaru's techniques were studied to develop countermeasures that later saved lives, how his research was cautiously revisited during medical crises when conventional approaches failed, how his very existence as a complex antagonist shaped the moral understanding of an entire generation of shinobi. Most significantly, Konohamaru says, as the timeline shifts to more recent events, his legacy lives in how we approach knowledge itself, the ethical frameworks we've developed, the oversight committees, the balance between innovation and restraint, all responses to the questions his journey forced us to confront. The final section of the timeline shows the establishment of the Konoha Historical Institute itself, created specifically to ensure that history is preserved accurately without idealization or demonization of its key figures. This institute exists partly because of him, Konohamaru explains, because we recognized that understanding our most complicated historical figures is essential to understanding ourselves. We study Orochimaru not as a simple villain, but as a complex case study in brilliance without sufficient ethical grounding, in vision without adequate compassion. The timeline dissolves, returning you to the research room. The pendant now bears an additional marking, a small spiral reminiscent of the Sarutobi clan symbol, representing the continuity of knowledge across generations. This is the 8th fragment, Konohamaru tells you, the understanding that complicated legacies don't end with the individual, but continue to shape those who come after, sometimes in ways the originator never intended. He gathers his research materials, organized with methodical precision. The 9th guardian awaits where new growth emerges from old roots. There you will learn how transformation continues across generations. Before you leave, Konohamaru shares one final observation. My grandfather never stopped believing that Orochimaru could find his way back to the light, not from sentimentality, but because he recognized that the same brilliance that led him into darkness could potentially lead him out again, given sufficient reason and opportunity. He returns to his work as you depart, the young scholar continuing his careful analysis of the past to better understand the present and guide the future. The pendant directs you onward, its warmth suggesting you're nearing the completion of your journey as you seek the 9th guardian and the penultimate fragment of understanding. The pendant leads you away from the village center toward the outskirts, its pull growing stronger with each step. You pass through residential districts where lights begin to glow in windows as evening approaches, then beyond the main gates to a secluded area where newer dwellings have been constructed, homes that blend architectural styles from multiple villages, suggesting residents with diverse origins. At the end of a quiet lane stands a traditional house with modern elements, sliding paper doors alongside large windows, a traditional tile roof covering spaces clearly designed for scientific work. The garden combines medicinal herbs with ornamental plants, practical and beautiful, coexisting in carefully tended harmony. As you approach, the door slides open to reveal a young man with pale blue hair and gentle eyes that nevertheless convey keen intelligence. Something in his features suggests Orochimaru, though softened, humanized, a resemblance that goes beyond the physical to a certain quality of measured observation. The seeker arrives with 8 fragments, he says, his voice carrying a calm certainty. I am the 9th guardian, the sun, who carries forward while choosing his own path. He introduces himself as Mitsuki, though you had already guessed his identity, one of Orochimaru's most successful synthetic humans, though that clinical description fails to capture the fully realized person who stands before you. More than an experiment or a clone, he has developed his own distinct identity while carrying aspects of his creator. Please, enter, he says, gesturing toward the interior of the home he shares with his partner, a skilled medical nin from Sunagakure, he explains, as he prepares tea in a sunlit kitchen that contains both traditional elements and advanced scientific equipment. The pendant pulses strongly in Mitsuki's presence, responding to the direct connection he represents. When you're both seated with steaming cups of fragrant tea, he studies the pendant with evident interest. 8 fragments gathered, he observes. My contribution will be the 9th, the understanding that transformation continues through those who come after, who both carry forward and transcend their origins. When he touches the pendant, the transformation is subtle. The room remains, but time seems to flow differently. Moments of significance, highlighted by a soft glow that draws your attention to particular interactions. You witness Mitsuki as a child, created in Orochimaru's laboratory, but raised with a freedom his creator never extended to previous subjects. You see careful guidance rather than control, opportunities for choice rather than predetermined purpose. He created me, but did not own me, Mitsuki explains, as you watch his younger self question, explore, occasionally defy his parents' expectations. This was perhaps his most significant transformation, learning to value the autonomy of another above his own designs. The scenes shift to show Mitsuki's integration into Konoha, his formation of bonds with peers, his development of a moral framework distinct from his creators. Throughout, Orochimaru maintains a presence in his life, distant yet accessible, offering guidance without imposing direction. Our relationship exists in the space between conventional parent-child bonds and something entirely unique, Mitsuki reflects. He gave me life, knowledge, and certain aspects of himself, but also the freedom to reject any of these if I choose. You observe their interactions over the years, complex conversations about identity, purpose, and ethics, moments of unexpected connection despite their different worldviews, the gradual development of mutual respect that transcends their unconventional beginning. What few understand about Orochimaru, Mitsuki says, as the visions continue, is that his capacity for growth remained intact despite everything. Not growth toward conventional morality or redemption, he would find such concepts irrelevant, but growth in his understanding of human connection and its value. The scenes advance to show Orochimaru visiting this very house, engaging with Mitsuki as an adult, treating him not as creation, but as an independent being worthy of respect. Their conversations reveal a relationship that has evolved from creator-subject to something approaching parent-child, though filtered through their unique circumstances. He learns through observation, Mitsuki explains, watching my connections with others, my integration into village life, my formation of bonds he once considered limitations. He doesn't emulate these choices, but he has come to understand their value in ways his earlier self could not. The final vision shows a recent interaction, Orochimaru sharing research findings with Mitsuki, their collaborative work on healing techniques that combine innovative approaches with ethical applications. Their dynamic shows the influence flowing in both directions now, creator and created both shaping each other's ongoing development. This is perhaps his most meaningful legacy, Mitsuki observes, as the visions fade, returning you fully to the present moment, not his jutsu or his scientific discoveries, but his eventual recognition that true immortality lies in what we pass to those who come after us, not through control, but through the freedom to carry forward what is valuable while discarding what is not. The pendant now bears a new addition, a small crescent moon symbol representing new growth from established roots, the continuation of legacy through transformation rather than replication. This is the 9th fragment, Mitsuki tells you, the understanding that our greatest impact often lies beyond our direct actions, in how we influence those who will shape the future we ourselves will not see. As evening deepens outside the windows, Mitsuki refreshes your tea. The 10th guardian awaits where all journeys eventually lead. There you will find the final fragment and the completion of understanding. You sit together in comfortable silence for a moment, appreciating the peaceful home he has created, so different from the laboratories where his life began, yet still containing elements of that scientific precision alongside warmth and humanity. He remains a complicated figure, Mitsuki acknowledges, as you prepare to leave, neither redeemed nor condemned, but continuing to evolve in his own unique way. I carry parts of him forward, as do many others, some knowingly, most unknowingly. This too is a form of the immortality he he once sought through very different means. The pendant grows warm against your skin as you depart, guiding you toward your final destination and the completion of the journey you began beneath the ancient cedar tree. Night has fallen completely now, the stars sharp and clear above Konoha, the village lights creating a constellation of human presence below. You follow the pendant's guidance away from the village, back toward the forests where your journey began. The circle nears completion as you walk through moonlit woods, the combined fragments of understanding creating a weight that feels significant but no longer burdensome, knowledge integrated rather than merely accumulated. The path leads upward to a promontory overlooking both the village and the wilderness beyond, a place where civilization and nature exist in perfect balance within a single view. Here, where the journey began, must also end, and the final guardian awaits to provide the 10th fragment that will complete your understanding of the complicated legacy of the snake Sannin. As you reach the promontory, you find a simple stone bench positioned to view both forest and village. Sitting upon it is a figure that seems at first glance to be Orochimaru himself, but as you approach, you realize this is something different. Not quite solid, not quite transparent. The figure has the appearance of the snake Sannin, but carries an ethereal quality that suggests something beyond physical presence. The seeker arrives with 9 fragments, the figure says, its voice familiar, yet somehow containing multitudes. I am the 10th guardian, the essence, that which remains when all transformations are complete. You sit beside this manifestation, understanding it represents not Orochimaru himself, but the distilled truth of him, the core that persisted through all transformations, the fundamental nature that remained consistent despite every change of body, method, and purpose. The pendant at your chest pulses with a steady rhythm now, 9 fragments harmonizing in proximity to this final piece. The figure observes it with a slight smile that carries Orochimaru's characteristic blend of knowledge and mystery. 9 fragments gathered. It notes, my contribution will be the 10th, the recognition that beneath all transformations lies an essential truth, unchanging despite every outward change. When the figure's hand, neither warm nor cold, touches the pendant, you experience not visions, but direct understanding, as though knowledge flows into you without requiring interpretation. The core of Orochimaru was never evil or good, but something more fundamental, a question taking human form. What are the limits of human potential? Can they be transcended? At what cost? To what purpose? His every action, from his earliest research to his most transgressive experiments to his eventual recalibration, stemmed from this essential nature, the embodiment of humanity's oldest question about its own boundaries. Where others accepted limitations, he questioned them. Where others saw immutable laws, he saw challenges to overcome. Where others balanced discovery against ethics, he prioritized knowledge above all else until experience gradually taught him the value of balance through consequences both intended and unforeseen. You understand now that he never truly sought power for its own sake, but as a means to pursue questions that required strength to explore. He never desired destruction, merely the clearing away of obstacles to understanding. Even his cruelest actions were, in his mind, steps toward answering questions about existence itself, though this explanation does not excuse them, merely contextualizes them within his essential nature. The understanding flows deeper, showing how this questioning essence remains his core contribution to the shinobi world, not his techniques or discoveries, but his fundamental challenging of assumptions about what humanity can and should become. As the direct knowledge integrates with the 9 fragments you've already gathered, the pendant transforms one final time. No longer separate pieces joined together, it becomes a perfect whole, a circular emblem bearing the kanji for transformation at its center, surrounded by symbols representing each fragment of understanding you've gathered. This is the 10th fragment, the figure tells you, its form already beginning to disperse like mist under morning sun. The recognition that beneath all complexities lies a simple truth. We are defined not by what we do, but by why we do it, not by how others perceive us, but by what drives us from within. As the figure fades completely, the pendant emits a soft, steady glow that illuminates the promontory. Below, Konoha continues its nighttime existence. Lights in windows, guards at posts, the eternal rhythm of a village that has endured destruction and rebuilding multiple times yet maintains its essential nature through every transformation. Beyond the village, the forest stretches dark and mysterious, containing both danger and wonder, much like the complicated legacy of the snake Sannin himself. Neither can be reduced to simple judgment. Neither can be fully understood without accepting contradiction and complexity. You sit on the stone bench as night deepens around you, the completed pendant resting warm against your skin. The journey has brought you not a simple answer, but a complex understanding that some figures defy easy categorization, that brilliance and transgression can coexist in the same person, that transformation continues even when we believe it complete. In the distance, a white snake moves silently through the underbrush, its scales catching moonlight like scattered pearls. It pauses, regarding you with ancient eyes that seem to hold recognition, before continuing on its mysterious path, neither good nor evil, simply itself, pursuing its nature with perfect focus. The breeze carries the scent of forest and village combined, earth and leaves, mixing with cooking fires and human presence. You close your eyes, feeling the weight of understanding settle into you, like knowledge absorbed rather than merely acquired. When you open them again, the first hint of dawn touches the eastern horizon, promising another day of continuous transformation. You stand, ready to return to your own path with new perspective. The pendant, now a complete emblem of understanding, will remain with you, a reminder that the most complicated legacies resist simplification but reward careful study. Like a scroll gently closed after long reading, your journey of understanding completes its circle, leaving you changed in ways that will continue to reveal themselves with time. As you walk down from the promontory toward whatever awaits next, you carry with you not judgment, but insight, the most valuable legacy any seeker can inherit from those whose complicated paths they study. Behind you, the stone bench stands empty, waiting for the next seeker who dares to look beyond simple narratives to the complex truths that lie beneath. End of narrative.